Welcome to the How of Business with your host, Henry Lopez, the podcast that helps you start, run, and grow your small business. And now, here is your host.
Welcome to the How of Business podcast. This is Henry Lopez. And on this episode, I share 5 tips for better emails. If you want faster responses, fewer misunderstandings, and less frustration in your business, it starts with how you write your emails. It's one of the key methods of communication, obviously, within a small business. Most people overlook this skill, but mastering it and helping your team master it as well can instantly improve how you communicate and get things done, both internally, with your customers, with your partners, and with your vendors. You can find all of the How of Business resources, including the show notes page for this episode, and learn more about my one-on-one and group coaching programs at thehowofbusiness.com. I also invite you to please join the How of Business community on Patreon and subscribe wherever you might be listening so you don't miss any new episodes. Email is still the primary communication tool in most businesses. It's how we communicate internally, externally, amongst our teams, with vendors, with prospective customers, with existing clients. It is the key method of communicating in most of our environments. Yet what I see as a recipient of emails is how often they're so poorly written and ineffective, which can lead to confusion, delays, frustration. And so I think it's well worth what might seem as something very simple and not that important. I think it's worth developing strong email skills, because really what you're developing is stronger communication skills. So strong email skills, writing effectively crafted emails, leads to faster decisions, better relationships, and higher credibility. So let's start with tip number 1. Tip number 1 is don't bury the headline. Now, that's a term that comes from the newspaper world, which is that the way newspaper articles are written is that between the headline and maybe the first or second paragraph, you've gotten all of the information that you need. And then you can decide if you want to read more about more details, more facts. But you've got the gist of it. You understand what it's about by reading the headline and the first paragraph. And so that approach or design is a good practice to follow for emails as well. Another term for it is the BLUF method, B-L-U-F, which comes from the military world, which is about clarity and speed in communication. And B-L-U-F stands for bottom line up front. So you start with what is this about, what you need, and by when. So think about that structure very clearly, either in the subject line or the subject line in the very first sentence. You tell me as the recipient, what is this email about, what do you need, and by when. If the recipient of an email gets it and thinks, I'll read this later when I have more time, because immediately what I see is all of this text, this long email that I know is going to take me some time to read, even if it's important. The reality is that most of us are scanning emails and determining, do I read it now? Do I process it now? Or do I come back to it later? And so if that's the answer, if that's the response that you get from people for the most part, but if the reaction is, I'll read this later when I have more time, then I think you've failed in the way of communicating via that email. The goal is that I say as a recipient, I get the point immediately. I can come back for details if I need to. So if the recipient only reads the first line or the subject line in the first paragraph, short paragraph, I'm talking 1 or 2 sentences, then they still understand the message. They get the key takeaway or what I'm asking for or what it is that they need to do. So that's tip number 1. Don't bury the headline. Don't make me pay a price to get to the facts or what it is that I need to do, because the reality is that I'm going to skip over it and come back to it later. And we all know what happens then. I may not get back to it. I might lose it in my inbox, and then that creates delay in communication. Tip number 2, make it scannable. So this is related to tip number 1, but it's about how it looks. Use bullet points. Early on in my career, I still remember this was one of my first jobs back in the 1980s. I had a coworker who taught me how to use bullet points in memos. Back then we were talking memos, not emails. But I used to write these paragraphs and these long dissertations explaining it. And I thought I was a great writer. And maybe I was, but it doesn't matter. I wasn't effectively communicating because the recipients of those memos had a hard time reading them. So he told me, just put it in bullet points. And that's something that has stayed with me ever since. So use that approach from a formatting perspective of breaking things down visually into bullet points so that you can organize your thoughts or your reply, especially when you're replying to somebody's email and you're communicating multiple points, or you're sending the email for the first time and it has multiple points that you want people to consider. Keep the paragraphs short. It's the same technique that we use on websites, which is, again, we all scan, we don't read. We initially scan through content and we pick out keywords, and then we determine, all right, does this require more of my time to read it in detail? So short paragraphs, bullet points, white space. Don't give me one big block, one big paragraph made out of 10 sentences. It's overwhelming visually. And again, it causes us to think, oh my, this is more than I can process right now. I'll come back to it later. And then I like to use bolding. Use bolding or color. You want to keep it professional, but I like to bold the key words or key sentences that I want to make sure the recipient reads, the most important key points. The key principle here is that your email should be understood in 10 seconds or less, or maybe even less than 10 seconds. In seconds, the recipient should be able to immediately determine, okay, I know what this is about, I know what they're asking me to do, and by when, if that's a component of it. So make it as clear as possible, as easy as possible to scan. That'll result in faster responses, fewer misunderstandings, and it signals and it shows professionalism. So structure your emails for speed and clarity. That's tip number 2. Tip number 3, less is more. So one objective, if at all possible. This is about focus now, the scope of the email, and how much you include in one email. One email ideally should be about one primary objective or topic. I know that's not always possible, but think about that. It might be better to break up into 2 or more emails if you've got multiple topics, especially if they're complex topics. So remove any extra content, remove repetition, remove unnecessary detail. Ask yourself, can I say this in fewer words? Should this be in 2 emails? So ask yourself those questions. Avoid writing long, detailed emails unless it's appropriate, and there are some times when it is. But for the most part, as we're communicating via email, it's about keeping it short and to the point. If it requires nuance or emotion, then don't use email. Sometimes picking up the phone is better, or scheduling a conversation. I understand that it doesn't always work and we don't always have that opportunity, but keep in mind that as with texting, email, or any other written form of communication, those nuances, those tones, that emotion often gets lost. So think about that in particular when we're trying to communicate and use words that might come across one way if we were speaking them, because we can use intonation and other effects that you don't have when it is written, and how that might be received by someone else. So those things really matter, and you really have to be aware of it. You have to read the email before you send it and make sure that it's coming across clearly, that any nuanced emotion is really being communicated clearly. If it is nuanced, it probably won't come across as clearly as you think it is. This less is more, though, is about respecting the reader's time, and more likely, of course, that they will reply or respond or read it. Everybody is overloaded with email, so you want to overcome that. You don't want to add to that so that you can get what you want in the way of a response from that email. Clarity and focus beats completeness every time. Let me say that again. Clarity and focus beats being complete every time. This is a challenge for me because I'm a detail guy, and so I tend to want to add more and more and more. If I do, what I try to do is provide that summary up front, get to the point quickly, and then I might add a section that says additional details. And I can add it there, and the reader can read that if they want to, but it's not necessary to understanding what the email is about or even to responding to my email. It goes back to don't bury the headline. So less is more is tip number 3. This is Henry Lopez with a brief break from this episode to tell you about our sponsor, Intuit QuickBooks Payroll. Running a small business is already a full-time job. Managing payroll and HR shouldn't feel like a second one. That's why so many businesses trust Intuit QuickBooks Payroll, the #1 payroll software for small businesses, to run payroll with confidence and keep everything connected to their books. As a small business owner, I use QuickBooks in my own business, and I see every day how much easier it makes managing our finances. And now QuickBooks Payroll is evolving. Starting this summer, it's expanding beyond pay runs to support how you hire, onboard, manage, and retain your team, all in one connected system. We're talking about bringing HR, time, benefits, and workforce data together, fully integrated with QuickBooks accounting, so you can operate with more clarity and confidence. Soon, with QuickBooks Payroll, businesses will be able to hire and onboard employees directly inside QuickBooks, manage HR documents with e-signatures and organized storage, automate multi-step HR workflows, and track time off, performance, and benefits alongside payroll. No duplicate data entry, no syncing between vendors, no learning an entirely new platform. Just one place to confidently manage your team and your business, where you're already running your finances. See what a difference QuickBooks Payroll can make for your business today and get ready for what's coming next. Learn more at quickbooks.com/workforce. That's quickbooks.com/workforce. Tip number 4, and this is a problem for me as an old guy, is don't write emails like text messages. Email is a more professional communication tool, and it really impacts your professionalism or the perception of your professionalism. So avoid the acronyms that we use or the shorthand that we use in texting. Don't send one-line unclear messages or sloppy rushed writing. It's not as acceptable, and it really impacts the perception that the recipient has of you and of your organization. So use complete thoughts, clear structure, and a professional tone as much as possible. Remember again that email lacks tone, so it's easy to misinterpret things. Avoid sarcasm and ambiguity, and always proofread. And of course, I use Outlook, and other email tools have spell checking and even grammar checking. Make sure that those features are turned on and use them. That has helped me improve my writing because of the tips that it gives me to make sure my writing is that much more clear. There are also third-party tools that you might want to install or apply to help you with this. Always proofread names in particular, numbers, of course, and attachments. That's another thing that Outlook has, is the feature, I think I have it turned on by default, that if I allude to an attachment, it makes sure there's an attachment. If not, it prompts me. I love that because I often will forget the attachment, as we all do. Not the end of the world. It is what it is. That's not the key takeaway. The key takeaway is don't write emails like text messages. So internal emails can be slightly more casual, of course, especially quick responses. I'm not talking about that. External emails, though, with clients and partners, that represents not just you, but your company and your brand. So you need to be much more careful with how those emails are written. Your email reflects your professionalism and attention to detail. And of course, these techniques roll up to what's most important, which is communicating effectively. And tip number 5 is a clear subject line and a clear ask. Make it easy to understand and for the recipient to act. The subject line should be specific and outcome-focused if possible. It should include a topic, an action, and timing. Remember the example that I gave you earlier that followed that structure. Please approve the Q2 budget by Friday. That's a good example that follows that structure, if at all possible, in the subject line. Again, most of us, I know I do, when I look at my inbox, I'm scanning subject lines to see, of course, I'm scanning who's from, but also subject lines to see if it's something that I need to respond to or read now, or if it can wait. And if it can wait, it often means I may never get to it, right? So be clear on that, on your subject line and a clear ask. Another example might be approval needed, budget by Friday, or meeting reschedule, time options. Optionally, use simple tags like action required. I'm talking about in the subject line. Action required or FYI might signal, and this is something you might develop internally within your organization, these tags that identify and help me as a recipient determine if it's something I need to respond to or not. Lots of email systems like Outlook have also the ability to prioritize. You can make an email urgent, so use those, but I think it's good to establish a standard or a rule within your organization as to how you use those so everybody's on the same page and you can take advantage of them. So let me walk through an example here that begins to apply all of these tips. I'm going to read first the before email, and then we'll break it down and read how it might be rewritten. So here's an email. This is the before. The subject line is quick question. And the email reads, "Hi, John. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to check in on the Q2 budget and see if you had a chance to review it yet, and also wanted to get your thoughts on the updated marketing spend since we increased it a bit. And also if you think we should move forward with the new vendor we discussed last week or wait until next month. And also just wanted to confirm if Friday still works for the team meeting or if we need to reschedule. Let me know when you get a chance. Thanks." I bet you've all received emails. Maybe you've even written emails like that. I'm sure I have. A lot of different points communicated, one big paragraph. You can't see it here as I describe it, but it came in one big paragraph, didn't break it down. It's one big block of text communicating multiple things. So no clear headlines. The intent is buried, multiple unrelated questions. It's certainly not scannable. You can't see that, but imagine, if you will, that it's a block of text, one big paragraph. Vague subject line, of course, and no clear ask or deadline. So what am I going to do with that email? I'm probably going to scan it, read a sentence or two, and then move on. I'll come back to it because it's too much work right now. I'm busy. I'm going through my emails. And then, of course, we know what happens. Now I might not get back to it, or might be longer or take longer than you would like. So here's how we might improve that. The subject line might change to action needed, budget approval plus vendor decision by Friday, in parentheses. So a lot communicated in that subject line that makes it easy for me to scan and understand, there's action needed here. It relates to the budget approval. We discussed this, and the vendor decision that we discussed. And by Friday, that's my deadline. Very clear. And then the message might read, John, I need your input on the Q2 budget and vendor decision by Friday. Very clear opening sentence. And now the way that this is structured is by numbers. Number 1, bullet approval. Total, $12,500. Change, increased marketing spend. Question, do you approve? Number 2, and this is all laid out format-wise, vendor decision. And then it goes on to number 3. So you get the point. We're applying now that headline that tells me immediately what this is about and what action I might need to take. It's scannable because it's broken down by numbers. Could have been bullet points, but numbers is easy as well. Less is more, so not a bunch of filler words. It's not a big long text message. It's clear written communication. It's structured and it has a professional tone. And again, the subject is both the subject and the ask. So that's an example of how you might rewrite an email like that. I'll have this example on the show notes page for this episode at thehowofbusiness.com if you want to refer to it as an example to help you with how to better structure your emails. Better emails equal better business outcomes. That's the bottom line. And this is a simple skill to develop that has high impact, high ROI. Doesn't take that long to think about and apply these rules. I encourage you to apply them for yourself and to help your team develop this email writing skill because it improves everybody. It improves outcomes. It adds speed to communication. And most important though, clarity. So before you send your next email, pause and apply this quick checklist. Is my main point in the first sentence or in the subject line or both? Can this be scanned in 10 seconds or less? Is it as short and to the point as possible? And is my ask clear with a deadline, if that applies? If you do just that, your emails will immediately become more effective. I want to encourage you to write emails that respect people's time, that make your point clearly, and that drive action. And you'll immediately stand out as a better communicator and a more effective business owner. This is Henry Lopez, and thanks for joining me for this episode of The How of Business. I encourage you to comment or reply or email me if you've got any further thoughts on these email techniques and other techniques that have worked for you. I wish you the best as you start and grow your successful and profitable small business. I release new episodes every Monday morning, and you can find the show anywhere you listen to podcasts, including the How of Business YouTube channel and at my website, thehowofbusiness.com. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to The How of Business. For more information about our coaching programs, online courses, show notes pages, links, and other resources, please visit thehowofbusiness.com.